All right, good Wednesday morning. Halfway there. Glad you could join us today. We're going to continue looking at this 10th Psalm and kind of some heavyweight material here that David is dropping on us as he describes an evil, a wicked person. He has started by asking in verse 1, why, or God, why are you seemingly ignoring the wicked? And then it's almost as if David sets off to lay out his case as to why he thinks God should intervene, what it is that they're doing that is wicked. Just trying to, and so as we look at that again, the challenge we started with yesterday in the verses 2, 3, and 4 was in looking at the wicked to be cautious and careful in our own life that we don't have any of these things in us. That we allow God to search us and to try us, to examine us for any wickedness that might taint our life. And so we're going to pick up today in verse 5, where again, describing the wicked man, David says his ways are always grievous. Thy judgments are far above, out of his sight. As for all his enemies, he puffeth at them. He puffeth at them. We'll look at that, and what a description of a wicked man. And there's over the years there's been people, it seems like Bible scholars have always kind of disagreed over this word here in verse 5, over grievous, exactly what it means. In the King James, obviously it's the word grievous. Other translations have translated the word as prosper. And so I think you can see immediately the disagreement between scholars and how they would look at this verse when his ways are always prosperous, or his ways are always grievous. There would seem to be a great difference in those two. But I think either way, the point of the statement is that the wicked seemingly always in their ways are, again, they are always ignoring God, that they're always ignoring his counsel and his device in all their decisions. It seems like many people in the world today, they only want God's input when everything else goes wrong, when nothing else seems to work. They are they're then they want God to get involved. The idea that this wicked man, this lawless man that we're talking about here in these verses, he is, again, it comes back to that pride that David talked about. He is so proud of himself and his ways that he just thinks he doesn't need any counsel from God or for the godly. His judgments are far above, out of his sight. He doesn't even concern himself with any of the judgments or the rulings of God. And this idea at the end of the verse when it says he puffeth at them, very again the very picturesque language of the King James Bible. You can almost see somebody better than I can explain it. You can almost imagine you probably. He puffeth at them. He hears the judgments of God. He just, just brushes them off. They don't apply to him and his situation, and so his next descriptor of the wicked man, as he goes on about his ways, does his things in spite of God's commandments, and just kind of shrugs off anybody who tries to give him any counsel. He has said in his heart, I shall not be moved, for I shall never be in adversity. Again, do you hear the pride in that statement that David started talking about here, that the wicked are content. They are convinced that there'll never be repercussions for their actions. I'll never be moved. I'm going to be safe. I'm going to be good all the way through the very end of this thing, and I shall never be in adversity. Basically, he says, "Catch me if you can." And has no regard whatsoever. Again, back to that idea at the end of the previous verse, that he puffeth at them. He just, I'm good. I don't care what the Bible says. And so another descriptor of the wicked, his mouth is full of cursing and deceit and fraud. Under his tongue is mischief and vanity. And so, one of the things that I think that most of us are aware that David points out here, and that is eventually what's in a man's heart will eventually come out in his words. If you listen to a man talk long enough, the wickedness of his heart will eventually, it'll come out. My father-in-law, I've heard him say often, what's in the well comes up in the bucket. And that's exactly what David says about a wicked man. Says you can tell about how the heart by listening to the words he uses. He says his mouth is full of cursing. And the word cursing there is not really what we think of as we think of cursing kind of as a certain list of words, but the word cursing here is basically making promises that to swearing to oaths that they know they have no intention of keeping. Deceit, cursing and deceit. Again, the idea of not being trustworthy, of not being able or not willing at least to tell the truth, and fraud. Again, the word fraud, a little bit different than perhaps our modern interpretation. It's the idea of threats and intimidation, and so it's again the three put together are more kind of a picture of a man who his words are. It's not the idea of being profane that we may think about. It's the idea of again of his words. You can't trust him. His language. Again, mischief. We understand the idea of mischief that he talks about here, and vanity. Vanity here, just being deceptive, and so again, it's not just a matter, of using certain words that we might consider profane. It is language. It is saying things that are untrue. It is